Thank you very much again. And at the outset, I'd just like to acknowledge the Professor Don Patterson from the School of Law in Vanuatu. I acknowledge and thank both him and Peter Tusawau, who's our instructional designer at the Emilis campus in Vanuatu, for contributing to this presentation. I've chosen the title, A Snapshot of Transformative Pedagogies, to keep with the theme, in keeping with the theme of this forum, but also to indicate by the word snapshot that this is by no means exhaustive of what's happening at the University of the South Pacific. I know that there's a wealth of experiences, both in online and blended modes, in the course designs, the program designs and development that all of our colleagues are currently undertaking, both in the faculties and in the professional sections that support the faculties. So this is merely a snapshot, and I've worked collaboratively with the School of Law and our ID off-site to be able to bring this together. So I do acknowledge and thank them in this at the start of this presentation. The presentation, as I said, was prepared by the three of us. And I'm glad I included this slide, because this morning when the VC got up to make his welcoming remarks, he also held up the strategic plan, which should be, or should offer us, should be the direction we should be taking with regard to locating any of the work or the projects that we are currently undertaking at the University of the South Pacific, and particularly so in learning and teaching. So to anchor this presentation, I have chosen the priority area 1, into which this kind of falls, but not directly. But you will see as I go through the presentation that with regard to transforming USP's pedagogy and curriculum, that's a statement that has very, very many composite bits. And as we undertake the work and the research of course design and development and program design and development, we are putting those pieces together to be able to understand what it is, what it means for us as both designers and academics, as educators in the USP region, to be able to transform USP's pedagogy and curriculum. And so with regard to the presentation, you see that as we move along, this is, as I said, this is just a snapshot. It's an example of what someone has taken. And as some of you who know Professor Don Patterson, he's been a long-serving member of our L&T community here. So he's actually provided us with some very, very challenging scenarios and questions about, what would I be doing online? And may I also add that his intellectual curiosity, which happens also to be one of our student, our graduate attributes, is only matched by the speed of change of the L&T environment. So he has a very robust, very healthy intellectual curiosity that challenges us as educational designers or instructional designers about what we're doing and how we're doing it, particularly if it's going to be underscored by pedagogy that will mediate between the changes and where we want to go. So what are these transformative pedagogies? I'm no expert at this. I see that Dave also this morning included many, many elements of definitions, experiences that may not be conclusive and that are not conclusive, and that we can keep adding to in each person or each individual or each institution's journey towards finding out what transformative pedagogies mean for them as educators located in a particular institution. And I refer very briefly to the transmission model just as a reference point when I talk about transformative pedagogy. So the transmission model of education, which I think Susan DVC Kelly talked about this morning, where the stage existed, and that we came to a classroom and we were taught by a person who held all the knowledge, it was assumed that we were filled with this knowledge as the sage was talking. And then on the other hand, I've taken that as the first point of reference. Then I've gone across the continuum to the other side, and I've looked very briefly at the transformative model, where we understand that students need to create the knowledge. And I think Dave covered that very, very well as well in his presentation this morning. So I spoke to Peter in Vanuatu, and we discussed a few things, and he actually brought up this example that they tried in semester 2 of 2012, just last year with Professor Don Patterson. As I said earlier, Professor Don challenges us on many fronts about the integration of technology in education. And so this was his idea. He came up with a few ideas, and he talked to Peter. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to use multiple choice questions in tests, but he wanted to go for the higher or for the deeper level learning in constructing and creating or designing these multi-choice questions. And even more, that wasn't just the point, and these were assessed. But the point for him was, how do I give valuable feedback? Feedback that will transform, that will make a difference to the student's learning experience. So what they did was, this was the design, basically, that at the center of the design, we have our learning management system, which is Moodle. Then they had the teacher and the ID preparing the multi-choice questions. You had students who attempted 45-minute tests over a 3-day period. You also had recordings or topic notes, etc., of face-to-face lectures. And then, because it's the School of Law, they have the face-to-face lectures there in Vanuatu, but they also have tutorials, and they also have many, in fact, I think the bulk of the students, the majority of the students, are outside of Vanuatu. So that presented the biggest challenge, is how then to ensure that the quality of this course is maintained, whether we have access to them or not. And again, as I said earlier, Dave also commented on this. You know, when you can't go to the person, you can't take the person to the classroom or to the space where the learners are, what do you do? So that's, I was hoping that Dave was here, just to give an idea of the collective space of the widely distributed spaces where the collective learning needs to take place. So Dave, this picture is for you, just so that you know, right here we know exactly what it is we're dealing with, the situation or the location. And so we had LW301 online students being able to freely discuss in video conferencing tutorials via React in the 5 campuses, Emilis, Lathala, Alafua, 4 campuses, and Nuku'alofa. How was this going to be done? So they decided that they would use React, and that was the way of being able to discuss the feedback, which was the most important part of this exercise or this project. And the feedback, first of all, they had the scenario-based MCQs. And they also found that some of their students who were also doing other subjects were also wanting an opportunity to explore this and the other subjects that they were taking, because they felt that scenario-based learning, so they posited a scenario, which I'll show you in a minute, which required them to analyse a given situation. So, as most of you know, law is made up, particularly the readings in law, they're often made up of heaps and heaps of case law, lots and lots of cases that students need to process, and understand, and then to apply. So the scenario was based on a given situation, which asked them to then analyse and then apply the knowledge that was relevant to that particular set of facts. And here's the scenario, just as an example. This is one of the scenarios. And I don't read law, but just looking at that, I know that this has been very, very well prepared and designed to capture the issues that Professor Don wanted his students to then be able to think about, to analyse in terms of not just the reading of the resources that they were required to do, but in discussions with each other. And then after the test, they were then discussing either face-to-face or through React the kinds of answers that they provided, especially those that were not correct. So the discussion forum for those answers, you can see, provided the kind of discourse. Set up the discourse for them to be able to exchange their ideas, see where they went wrong, perhaps argue, and then, most importantly, as lawyers, this is what they need to do. This is what they will need to do when they graduate. because there will be no right or wrong answer. And again, I refer to Dave's presentation this morning about not having a right or wrong answer, but creating the spaces and the opportunities for students to be able, for learners and students to be able to discuss with or without a lecturer. Hopefully sometimes at some stage they will have access to an academic or a tutor or an educator who can assist when they run into problems. And then they looked at, when they were designing this, they also looked at the kind of skills or the kind of the order, either the higher or lower or both, the combination of both, in terms of, I think they've used Bloom's taxonomy here, the newer version of Bloom's. And so they thought that the combination, that's how they came about with the combination of online scenario-based MCQs and the feedback discussions, the feedback sessions that they needed to assess their answers in order to promote higher order learning. What they did find from this project is that the oral feedback was key to this scenario-based MCQ situation. They found that what happened with particularly with the video conferencing, was that it was allowing the kind of flexibility for students to discuss those very areas, those grey areas in law that they would have to do as lawyers, and also for the online students who did not have access to a tutor or a academic in person to be able to either post up in discussion forums, or if they had access to a campus, that they could actually go and have partake in these discussions. But most importantly too is when they weren't able to go in, because React records these sessions, they were able to get a recording to assist them as well. And this they mapped this across and saw that in particular it mapped very, very directly to critical thinking and oral communication skills, specifically that you can find in the graduate attributes in the strategic plan in the area of academic excellence, intellectual curiosity and integrity, cross-cultural competencies, and so on. And another thing that Professor Don found out when he actually started using this method was that he thought, in terms of a class of 140, which may be just on the big side of small or the small side of big, that he found that it was an incredible time saver having Moodle automatically correct the MCQs. Saved him a lot of trouble and time trying to process this. But again, I'm not saying that this is an easy task, but he did admit that initially this required a lot of work. But I think that we all understand in this transitional phase of change that we're all mitigating, that all of the first steps that we'll take will require us to do a little bit more work than perhaps we were doing, because we are going to be those agents of change. I'll talk a little bit about the problems or the challenges, and I know that the Vice-Chancellor this morning said that we should be constructive, and indeed Peter and Professor Don thought, well, if our main problem is power cuts in some campuses, what else do we do about that? So what they did was they came up with a design of, because initially the students needed to do 10 tests. So they increased it to 12, so that it gave people the opportunity that if a couple hopefully that only a couple of the tests would be those times that power was cut or some kind of connectivity was interrupted. They did have a little bit of a challenge with video conferencing because they saw that more and more they needed some more time slots. I'm glad, I think Kissy is here. Thank you, Kissy. So they need some more time slots, Kissy, which I know corresponds to more virtual and physical venues for React. But I know that's also being looked at, and that's perhaps some of the good news that we can give to Peter and Professor Don. So I thought that we should provide some of the kinds of challenges that you might come across if you want to try this way of integrating the technology with the education. And so with student feedback, I've chosen two good ones and one not so good one to reflect the kinds of the percentages that they got back. predominantly students, while they found this initially a challenge, they really enjoyed this way of learning. Because what happened was the focus wasn't completely or only on the test itself. What was much more important for them is that they could talk about why they got things wrong in the discussions that followed the test. And if I could just share with you what Professor Don has to say as well. He said quite a few things about this. I'll just tune in and hopefully the audio is working. Just to share a little bit about what he said before I end my presentation.
Sometimes there's an outage here. But this semester we have been happily relatively free of those outages, but that's really the only problem I think that we have faced with regard to the online tests. And in order to cover for any possible problems, what I do is to set, instead of 10 tests, I set 12, and then the Moodle assesses from the best 10, just to ensure that if some students are disadvantaged because of electrical or some technical problem, at least they have the chance to recover on the additional tests.
Thank you very much.